back a bit by the dump on GE here. So as an ex-employee and a stockholder with them,
I thought you were a farmer. You're an ex-employee of GE also?
Many guys.
Okay.
And I want to point out that GE has paid humongous income taxes into the state, into the United States, because all of the trading they have done in running their businesses in the United States, income tax are paid on everything they spend. And all the property was taxed. And all their employees, which I don't know what it is right now, but one time it was up towards 1 million in this country. They paid their income taxes.
I'm not suggesting GE did anything illegal.
So it is a great company. Most of the profit anyway, Congressman, was made overseas. Very little of this year's profit was made in this country.
So I'm not saying that they did anything illegal. They utilize current law deductions. I'm just saying we got a tax code that looks like Swiss cheese, you know, and it's got so many loopholes and deductions in there that my whole point is clear that stuff out and you can lower tax rates on everybody. The whole theory being the person in the business who makes the same amount of income should pay the same level of taxes. That's the whole idea. It was the guy in the orange and the lady in the black t-shirt.
First of all, I'd just like to say that from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate where you're going with this. I think you deserve a healthy pat on the back for having the guts to mix it up and be a leader rather than just a politician. But my question is, well, no, I should say and I'm wondering, do you really believe that that this budget can actually work for us, or is this something that maybe is palatable enough to actually get passed? Because, you know, I hate to be the one pointing out the 400-pound gorilla in the room, but I'm not sure that we have time to even worry about the budget crisis before we get to the currency crisis.
Yeah.
Now, with China moving away from buying our debt and Japan in no shape to buy more of our debt, and it didn't show on the pie chart there, but with the Federal Reserve printing money to buy our debt.
You know, I was going to do a Fed balance sheet chart, but I just figured I've already killed you with enough charts, I think. But yeah, go ahead.
You know, with the threat of quantitative easing 3 coming up, and the likelihood that money to pay for our debts is going to be printed rather than debts defaulted on. Do we have enough time for this plan to work?
So the question is, do we have enough time for this plan to work? Now, do I believe this plan works? Obviously I do. The CBO certifies that it does. These aren't my numbers. These are the Congressional Budget Office numbers. Is this plan going to pass this government in tech? No. We have divided government. Ultimately, negotiation and compromise has to occur. Where that's going, I don't know. Will it take another election? It may. My goal and hope, I don't think we're going to get some grand slam budget agreement. My guess and hope, my reasonable expectations are we'll get a single or a double. You know, I think with the debt limit, we'll have an opportunity to get some fiscal controls and down payment on spending controls and cuts with that. The Federal Reserve policy, I'm very nervous about this. If you look at those leading indicators of inflation, they're all, the bells are ringing. You know, you've got the yield curve, you've got the dollar plummeting, commodity prices, oil, gold, food, you name it. And the way the Fed looks at these things is they don't measure inflation like you do. They discount food and energy from their measurement, and they use an economic model called an alpha gap model, which I believe is flawed and late in catching inflation. And the problem is QE2, meaning money printing to buy debt, is a very dangerous precedent. The reason the Fed did it is to try and keep interest rates low to help the economy recover. Actually, the rates went up during quantitative easing. When they announced it, they went down, then they went up. And the Fed then decided to use another argument that it was creating a wealth effect by helping the stock market. Now, when they pulled QE2 away, which Bernanke said he was going to do in his press conference by the end of June, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens in the stock market. I think the stock market is more the interesting thing to watch than probably the bond market, but a lot of opinions surround that decision. The point is, are we putting the Fed in a position where they're just going to start printing money again, where what has been happening is with QE1 and QE2 is the Fed literally creates money to pay for Treasury's bonds. So the biggest buyer of our debt right now is our Federal Reserve printing money and buying the debt right now. And that debases our currency. If that extra money supply filters out through the economy, then what it ends up doing is it debases our currency. What do I mean when I say that? Our dollars don't buy as much. There's nothing more insidious a government can do to its people than to debase its currency, especially for people who lived on fixed incomes, for people who've already retired. They have their savings denominated in dollars. It just is a permanent erosion of their standard of living. And so, of all things the Federal Reserve should be focused on, it should be sound money, stable prices, securing the value of our dollar as a reliable store of value, not all this other stuff. So, as you can tell, I have strong opinions of it. I have legislation on this as well. I'm going to be reintroducing it, getting the Fed focused on keeping our currency intact and not doing all this other stuff. But the best thing we can do to help that situation from Congress, the fiscal authorities, is to get this situation under control. Because if you don't get your borrowing under control, and if we have to keep borrowing and borrowing more, and if the Chinese pull back and the Japanese start selling their bonds, then the Fed will have no choice but to just print more money to buy it and debase our currency. That will be, at the end of the day, the lesser of evils. And so one of the best things we can do is get our fiscal policy off of its collision course with our monetary policy. And so from where I stand as your representative, fixing this helps fix that.
Do you think it'll work, or are we being placated?
Nobody knows the answer to this. You know, we're in uncharted territory. What I do believe, I really believe this, is that America can get itself, we can get our mojo back. I really believe we can get back on top of our game. I really believe if we put the foundations of economic growth back in place, stop all the crony capitalism in spending and the tax code and regulations, you know, the picking winners and losers. We go after corporate welfare on the spending side of the budget in addition to the tax side in this budget. Have regulations that are transparent, reliable, fair, equal to everybody. Have sound money like we just described, low, predictable, stable tax rates. Get spending under control. Those are the cornerstones of growth that remove all the uncertainty that's now plaguing our economy. And if we do those things, I really do believe we can get this economy growing. We can get job creation back on front. And if we get the spending under control now, because we're the world's reserve currency, we will have bought ourselves a lot of time. And we will be able to cash flow, meaning bond finance, borrow the current generation of retirees, which is what we're proposing to do. We're saying this. We will borrow more money. We will have more deficits in order to guarantee current retirees have the promises that were made to them are kept if we can get this situation under control for the future and get our economy growing right now. And that's what we want to do to prevent a debt crisis, which if that hits, then all these other things end up happening. And so I do think it's not too late. I do think it's time to do it. But that window of opportunity, nobody knows, but it's shrinking. I have all these hearings in the Budget Committee where we bring all these economists in. They all basically tell us 2 to 5 years. I talked to Bill Gross the other day. You probably don't know who Bill Gross is. He's the biggest bond buyer in America. He runs a fund called PIMCO. He was telling me 2 to 5 years. Closer to 2, probably not 5. That's what you got. So let's hope so. Now, nobody knows. It was the lady over here.